Which running backs should you be starting or sitting in week 9 for fantasy football? We're about to tell you. Welcome back, fantasy endgame community. I'm Pierre. He is Chris. We're here to run down every running back that matters from every game, like we do all season long, to help you set the best lineup possible. Week 9 is going to be a very heavy week in terms of buys. We've got 6 teams that are on mini vacation. That would be the Browns, Broncos, Cowboys, Giants, Steelers, and 49ers. Before we get into the games that are being played, let me tell you about some running backs you don't have to worry about. They should be in your lineup no matter what. Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Josh Jacobs, welcome Travis Etienne, and Jonathan Taylor for now. All right, let's start with the first game of the week, the Thursday night matchup. Well, I don't think we can call it a showdown. It might be a not show up for the Texans. We'll see how they handle the Eagles, who are still undefeated, the only undefeated team, going to Houston. So on the Philly side, we get Miles Sanders going against the worst, by far, run defense in the league. You feel pretty good about Miles Sanders this week?
Yeah, this week, Miles Sanders, absolute must start. I mean, we saw what Derrick Henry did to this defense, but Dontrell Hilliard almost had 100 yards on like 8 touches. This run defense, one of the worst I've ever seen. You've got to start Miles Sanders.
This is the easiest call of the week. And look, I had Sanders as a boom last week against the Steelers. He did pretty well. I mean, it wasn't a humongous game, but it was pretty good. They just didn't really need to run the ball that much. I guess they were deciding to feed A.J. Brown. It's like cheating. I'm not even going to pick him this week because it's cheating. It's too easy. He's a must start, no doubt, in this matchup. And then the other side, Dameon Pierce, maybe his first really bad game of the season last week. How do you feel he'll do against this really good Philly defense?
Yeah, another tough spot for him. But I think Dameon Pierce, I mean, he's still getting pretty much all the work here. Catching a decent amount of passes. I don't expect a huge game from him, but still, I don't think you can bench him. I think you've got to start Dameon Pierce.
Yeah, I agree because even though obviously a bad matchup and game script, pretty sure it won't be in Houston's favor for very long, but he's one of the few true bell cow backs. He's going to get all the touches. He will catch passes. There is a chance for a touchdown. So, yeah, I mean, really, you've got to have a really good set of running backs that you could put if Pierce is on your bench. So he's pretty much a must start. Now, the Chargers taking on the Falcons. Of course, you're loving Austin Eckler if you have him in this matchup. But on the other side, let's look at the Falcons, and they've been running the ball, but who's it going to be this week because Cordarrelle Patterson could be back. So let's go through the whole what-if phase here. Tyler Algier had a pretty good game for himself. How do you think he can do against this Chargers kind of inferior run defense, either if Patterson does play or if Patterson doesn't play?
Well, if Patterson plays, I don't think you can really trust Algier. But if Patterson is out, I think Algier is a good start again this week. This Chargers run, I mean, the Texans run defense is on another level of bad, but the Chargers run defense is pretty bad in itself. So I think if Patterson is out again this week, Algier is a good start.
Yeah, I feel he's kind of a high-end RB3. Like, even if Patterson does play, I think he'll still get some run. I don't feel like they're just going to throw, 20 touches his way. Again, being a veteran who's been banged up a lot the last 2 seasons. Algier, great spot for him. He's got some juice. He's catching passes. So I think he is startable. But, of course, I feel much better about him if Patterson doesn't play. What about Caleb Huntley? Actually, Huntley looked better than Algier last week. He's getting big chunks of yardage. He's that bigger back who gets some goal line touches. What do you think about Huntley?
Yeah, again, if Patterson is out, I think in this matchup, Huntley is a guy you can play as like a flex if you need him kind of guy. So if Patterson's out, I think, on a week like this with so many running backs out, I think you can start him if you need him.
Yeah, that's right. Look, you might need a guy like him because, like you said, so many teams are on bye, and some good running backs like Chubb and Barkley need to be replaced. Look, this speaks to how good this Atlanta offensive line is. You got to give them credit because the talent, honestly, at the skill positions, and that includes quarterback, is not jumping off the page here. A guy like Huntley, no offense, an undrafted free agent, but he's getting chunks of yards. So look, if Patterson doesn't play, he is startable. But if Patterson's back, this is a guy I can safely bench. And then what about Cordarrelle himself? If he's back, you just throw him right back in the fire?
I mean, in this matchup, you have to. You got to assume if he's back, he will be the lead running back and get the majority of the touches. And against the Chargers, got to start him.
Absolutely agree. He's going to be a must start. Look, all these advanced stats talk about EPA and expected points. Patterson was doing really well before he got hurt. I think that continues for the reasons we mentioned. So if Patterson plays, fire him back up right away. Dolphins facing the Bears. Will we see another score fest like we did with a different NFC North team last week? That being, of course, the Lions. So let's start with Raheem Mostert. Didn't quite smash, but still was pretty effective. Will he do better or worse against the Bears?
I mean, I'd like to say he'll do better. This is another terrible run defense. And I don't think the Bears, unlike the Lions, can force the Dolphins into this super pass-heavy game script like we saw last week. Just did not expect this Dolphins defense to just roll over like that against the Lions. So in another good matchup, I think Raheem Mostert is a good start again this week.
Yeah, I think he's pretty much a must start. Bears defense, not much better. At least the run defense is not much better than Detroit's. And yes, game strip should go more their way. The Bears offense has been better. They're not going to put up points like Detroit did. So you got to fire up Mostert. What about this Bears backfield, which is now all of a sudden a timeshare? Let's start with Monty. What do you think of him?
Yeah, I think he's okay. I mean, the Dolphins, like we saw last week, this Dolphins defense, both through the air and on the ground, not very good right now. He's still catching passes, still getting, good amount of work. I think he's a good start this week, but not a must start.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where Montgomery has fallen now. He's pretty much a RB3 flex type, not a consistent RB2 because of Herbert. And look, I did mention this though. I know I recommended Khalil Herbert, who we're about to talk about, it as a strong waiver wire pickup if he's out there, because he's definitely been the better runner. But Montgomery is still the pass catcher. He does have a floor, so I think you can feel okay about him in this matchup. And then there's Khalil Herbert. I mean, looking great on the ground, but I just mentioned without a touchdown, maybe not a super secure floor. Thoughts on Week 9?
Yeah, I think again with so many good running backs out this week and in a good matchup, if you need him, like you need to flex him or you're really desperate at running back, I think he's got potential this week, so start him if you need him.
Agree. Again, I can't put him in that solid must-start category just because, again, he is still splitting time without a touchdown. The floor is not high enough, but he is a solid start. And look, a lot of people probably should be starting him based on how many teams are going to be on bye. Panthers at the Bengals. One side you got Joe Mixon, no questions there. On the other side, well, you got Deontay Foreman, who hopefully you were able to put him in your lineup last week. But this is going to be interesting because maybe Chuba Hubbard comes back, maybe he doesn't. And then I don't think I can say he's an absolute no doubt must start despite the 3 touchdowns last week because this is a road game against the Bengals. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I can't put him in the must start. I think he's an okay start this week, again, just because so many running backs out and so many teams on bye. But with Chuba probably back and in a tough matchup, start him if you need him, but not a must start.
Yeah, I'll say the guy we just talked about, Khalil Herbert, I feel a little bit better about him than I do about Foreman this week, honestly. But again, Foreman, you definitely can roll him out there, especially if you need a running back. But I'm just saying, don't get too excited from last week's points. That was the Falcons. This is the Bengals. Might not be as close to the game. I'm just saying. And then what about Chuba Hubbard? Status will be unclear until later in the week. But if he does play, do you put him in your lineup?
Probably not. I mean, it's a tough matchup, and even the first week without McCaffrey when these two guys played, Chuba Hubbard didn't really get a lot of work, honestly. I was really surprised. And he didn't catch a ton of passes either, so I don't think I can start Chuba Hubbard, especially coming off injury.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think he's kind of a fringe flex. Like, he start a bull if you're needing a running back, but I would feel better about Foreman still, so probably best to keep him on the bench. Packers at the Lions. Well, let's start with Aaron Jones, who's been looking great, even against Buffalo, over 100 yards just on the ground. We thought he would maybe make his day as a pass catcher, but he's just great as a runner, even despite the fact they were losing all game. So does Aaron Jones scream must start against Detroit?
Yeah, against Detroit. I mean, we've seen how bad this run defense is, and for some reason the Packers, they're like the Falcons now. It doesn't matter what the score is, doesn't matter what the situation is. They're just going to run the ball and run the ball and run the ball some more. So fire up Aaron Jones this week.
Yeah, against Detroit, I mean, there's no question. You have to start Aaron Jones. He's looked great. After the first couple of weeks where we thought it might be more Dillon, that's all changed. Aaron Jones looking like a must start. A.J. Dillon, I mean, he got a little more work last week, but maybe because it's Detroit, maybe this is the time you take a chance and put him back in your lineup. What do you think?
I mean, maybe. He's kind of like one of those guys we talked about that, if you're really desperate because the matchup is so good, you can start him if you need him, but not a guy I really want to start if I don't have to.
Yeah, I really want to be optimistic for Dillon. I mean, I do think, Lazard being banged up and the fact that they're just not passing the ball very well, I do feel like there should be a path for Dillon, but again, he's only kind of a emergency, like bye-week fill-in replacement here. There is touchdown upside. Look, it's Detroit. I mean, come on, he's got to do something against Detroit, right? And then for Detroit, DeAndre Swift, we can't put him as a must-start. He did score, but didn't see as much action as we thought. And of course, he's getting vultured at the goal line. So is DeAndre Swift a must-start for you?
I mean, he is for me. He still played over half the snaps. I think they're going to him up more and more. That first game back after missing a month, my guess is we see more DeAndre Swift this week. Packers' run defense isn't anything elite that you got to be scared of. Plus, we know Swift does most of his damage in the passing game anyways. I'm starting DeAndre Swift.
Well, that's the weird thing. Detroit was ahead by multiple scores early in the game. And so it wasn't a just sit back and, and try to catch up. It was the opposite. So that's why Jamal Williams got more run. But look, even though I don't necessarily expect Green Bay to get out to a lead, I think, DeAndre Swift is too talented. You've got to keep him in your lineup. He's definitely somebody who I'm going to start. And then I think Jamal Williams, I have to start him too because he's tied for the league lead in rushing touchdowns. He's getting fed the ball. Detroit's scoring, and I feel like he's got to be in there too.
I mean, for me, he's still just a flex him if you need him kind of guy because he's really just a touchdown-dependent guy. Like, he's not doing anything outside of touchdowns. He's not ripping off long runs. He's not getting 15-plus carries. Like, for me, if you need him, sure, because he could score, but outside of that, he's not going to give you much, so I can't put him anything more than like a flex start.
Colts going to take on the Patriots. Look, I know some of you are really tempted to pull Jonathan Taylor from your lineup, but we're sticking with him for one more week. Just keep the faith for now. Now on the Patriots, still got that timeshare going on. Ramondre Stevenson, though, is looking like the clear leader because he's getting a bunch of receptions, which we didn't anticipate. How do you feel about Ramondre in this matchup? You have to roll with him?
Yeah, he's getting close to, must-start territory, especially with his work in the receiving game. So if Mac Jones is going to keep dumping the ball off to him, which I think he will, I think you got to roll with Ramondre Stevenson this week.
You've got to, because all of a sudden, like I said, in PPR, all of a sudden he's not a liability. There's a safety net there. So this defense is not scaring anybody either. Definitely starting Ramondre Stevenson. Damian Harris is a little iffy these days. Is he too touchdown dependent?
I think he is. I mean, just not catching passes, not really heavily involved in the running game anymore. I think I have to sit Damian Harris.
Yeah, like I said, he kind of falls in a similar category with these guys we've talked who are not pass catching, mostly touchdown dependent, strong runners, but not necessarily getting enough volume to be trustworthy. So I got him a little bit below those guys like Herbert and Williams. So I think you can start him because he does have the opportunity to score or break big runs because he's a good runner, but he's not a must-start. Bills taking on the Jets. Let's start with Devin Singletary. Looked good at times, but look, he's a running back in the Bills, and who knows, by the time all said and done, maybe the Bills have traded for a running back. Oh, hopefully not. But let's assume it's still Devin Singletary in the lead. How strongly do you feel about him?
Not very. This is like we've seen it in the games where the Bills, it's crazy. Like last night, the Bills are up big early in the fourth quarter, and you think, okay, they're just going to run the ball and run out the clock. And no, they're just chucking the ball, and Josh Allen's throwing 2 interceptions. Like, why? Why are you throwing the ball right now? But that's all the Bills know how to do, it seems like. So he's fine. Like, if you're desperate and you have to flex him, but this isn't even really a good matchup. Like, the Jets' run defense is a lot better than we're used to. So, like, only if you're desperate.
Yeah, that's true. The Jets defense, overshadowed by how bad their offense is sometimes. But yeah, he's a desperation flex for me. And he always has some upside, but don't get carried away by the matchup. This isn't something where I expect a lot out of him. What about Michael Carter? I mean, now I think we'll see a little bit more James Robinson. Who knows? But Michael Carter against the Bills, maybe he catches a bunch of dump offs.
No, a hard pass here on Michael Carter. Even last week with James Robinson, I guess, probably being worked in, still hardly did anything. Now he gets a tough matchup. I know the Bills gave up a lot to Aaron Jones on the ground, but look, the Bills' defense was like, please run the ball. Just don't throw it on us. They're not going to worry about the Jets throwing the ball. So, no, I'm not starting Michael Carter.
No, I think I kind of said that last week. I said, oh, maybe Carter will get some receptions, and he didn't. So, no, I can pass on Michael Carter. I think I'm going to have to pass on James Robinson, too. I mean, even with more usage, what do we really expect?
Nothing. Hard pass. Hard pass on James Robinson.
Vikings taking on the Commanders. These teams both have records that are surprisingly good for them. So let's see what happens here. But Dalvin Cook, we don't have him quite in the no doubt must start category, but should he be there?
I don't think he should be in that range, but I think this week against this defense, not a scary defense, don't have to worry about it. Always has a chance to score a touchdown. I think he's a good start this week.
Yeah, it would be hard-pressed for me to find a situation where you're benching Dalvin Cook. It'd have to be like a 14 league. Yeah, I'm definitely starting Dalvin Cook against Washington. Brian Robinson, great story, not great stats, especially last week, actively hurting your team if you had him. So can you do something against the Vikings?
Probably not. I mean, he's already touchdown dependent, and now he's, 8 carries last week, and it wasn't like they were getting blown out by the Colts, so not starting Brian Robinson.
I don't see how you can. It's not even about the defensive matchup. It's more just about this run game. It's not producing much of anything. So I will pass on Brian Robinson unless you're really desperate. We do have to talk about Antonio Gibson because even though he's barely used as a runner, he was used quite a bit as a pass catcher last week. Does that continue?
I think it might because the Vikings have a good offense. I could see the Vikings, going up 2 scores, something like that against the Commanders and forcing them to throw, especially late in the game. And he's actually getting involved in the passing game. So definitely not a must start, but I think like on this week as a flex, if you need him, you can feel kind of okay about him, I guess.
I mean, I would have to be pretty desperate to put Antonio Gibson in there. Because I don't want to depend on that, kind of like I've talked about with other guys. You think they get involved because of the game script. It doesn't always work that way. So I'm passing on Gibson unless I really have no other option. Seahawks taking on the Cardinals. It won't be long before we say, don't even think about Kenneth Walker. Put him in your lineup. But do you think that's the case this week?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he's a guy you have to start, but we did see last week the risk with guys like Kenneth Walker. I mean, he saved it with that late touchdown, but prior to that, it looked like he was going to have a terrible week because he doesn't catch any passes, but he's still a great running back, getting a ton of volume against a not great run defense. I think you got to start him.
Yeah, I think one of these days maybe he doesn't score a touchdown in a game, but I don't think it'll be this week. I feel pretty good about his chances. I'm definitely putting Kenneth Walker in all my lineups. And then there's the Cardinals' run game, if you can call it that. Benjamin's been his backfield. He hasn't done much with it except for the 1 week where nobody started him. So let's assume James Conner still isn't ready for full action. If you got another game full of what do you do with it?
I mean, you almost have to start him. I don't like the Seahawks were a good matchup, and then they kind of shut down Saquon Barkley, so maybe they're not as good of a matchup. I'm not sure, but I think, a running back like Eno who's going to get involved in the passing game and getting a decent amount of work in a decent offense, I kind of feel like you have to start him. I don't expect a big game, but I feel like he's startable.
I don't know. I don't feel the same. I feel like Eno is kind of just a flex if needed. He really has not taken advantage of his opportunities. And so I don't know, the Cardinals just keep doing the same thing. They fall behind early, and then they have to pass like crazy to catch up, and then the running game just kind of falls off. And, I'm going to say he's a only start if needed. And then James Conner maybe will return at some point. If it happens to be week 9, what do you do?
If James Conner's back, I'm not going to feel as good as James Conner as I would about Eno because at least with Eno, he's only competing against like Darrell Williams. James Conner is going to have to compete against Eno and Darrell Williams. So, I I'm just out on James Conner this year. Not starting him. No.
Yeah, you being out on James Conner all draft season turned out to be a pretty good decision, and not just because of injury. It's like he wasn't doing much before that. Look, I don't feel good about Eno. I don't feel any better about Conner because you got the same situation, but a guy coming off injury. So, no, hard pass on James Conner. All right, then we got the Rams going to Tampa to take on the Bucs. Probably the two most disappointing offenses, especially rushing offenses this year. I mean, total letdown from two of the top teams from last year. So right now, the Rams, again, assuming nothing crazy happens on trade deadline, right before the deadline, you got Darrell Henderson as the lead back. Darrell Henderson's chances against the Tampa Bay run defense.
Not good. Not good at all. I am not starting Darrell Henderson.
No, he hasn't been good, period. And then now you got still, despite what they looked like against Carolina the other day, still a pretty good run defense. And so, no, I'm not starting Darrell Henderson. You might notice we took Leonard Fournette off the must-start without a doubt category, but do you fire him up against the Rams?
You know, there's a big part of me that wants to say no, but I understand you probably have to start him if you have him. I feel like it's going to be a huge letdown game for Leonard Fournette. He's going to have to catch 5 or 6 passes, which I guess he could do, but I think that's the only way. But then again, I don't think the Rams offense can force the Buccaneers into this pass-heavy game script. So, I mean, I guess you have to start him if you have him, but I think he's going to bust hard this week. So, but I guess you still have to start him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel great about him, but really, you're benching him for who exactly? I mean, it's just so hard to say that a guy that, you know, isn't clearly the lead back or on a worse team is going to do better than him. So I would say, yeah, you're going to start Leonard Fournette. You're just not going to love it. And then Rachaad White, do you think he gets in the mix, maybe as a pass catcher?
I mean, I definitely think he gets in the mix. That's my other worry with Fournette is I think White gets more in the mix this week. But it's a tough matchup against this Rams run defense, despite what Christian McCaffrey just did. But neither of these guys are Christian McCaffrey. So, no, I'm not starting Rachaad White.
Yeah, and, you know, hopefully nobody got fooled by the words of head coach Todd Bowles when he said, yeah, we really need to get Rachaad White more involved. And he, of course, did the exact opposite, and he got fewer snaps and touches. So, not getting fooled by that. I'm keeping White on my bench until further notice. Titans taking on the Chiefs. Well, the Chiefs now, I guess, have a 2-man, 3-man committee. I don't know. But Isaiah Pacheco is supposed to still be the starter. Does that mean Isaiah Pacheco should be a fantasy starter?
No, I'm kind of interested to see his usage here coming out of the bye, but I'm not ready to put him in my lineup. So, no, I'm not starting him.
Well, yeah, even the last game before the bye when he was supposedly the starter, I think he got, 8 carries? This is still the same running game that is second to the passing game. Titans actually have a decent run defense. Pacheco is a RB3 start if you need him, but that's it. And to me, CEH, that's kind of what he's always been, but I'll keep him in the same category as Pacheco because these guys will probably get even touches. Pretty much touchdown dependent, so you can start him if you're in need.
Yeah, I agree. For CEH, if you need him, you can start him. He always has touchdown upside in this offense, but outside of that, not going to give you a lot.
And then the week ends on Monday night with the Ravens going to take on the Saints. Look, Alvin Kamara still will be in New Orleans. You got to start him. In Baltimore, it's Gus Edwards as still the lead. Do you feel good enough about him against the Saints defense?
No, I know the Saints defense hasn't been good, but coming off an injury, coming off an ACL, I mean, no, I'm not putting Gus Edwards in my lineup.
I think Edwards is startable because, look, even though last week, of course, he didn't smash like he did in his first game back, he still averaged a decent amount of yards per carry. I think he got a little banged up, but that was a Thursday game. He's had time to rest. This Saints defense, still not good. I feel decent enough about Gus Edwards. I have him kind of as a low-end RB2 this week. And then there's Kenyon Drake. Any hopes for Drake to do something?
Only if Gus Edwards is out. I mean, when Gus Edwards left that game last week, Kenyon Drake looked good, and he looked good in his other start. So I think only if Gus Edwards is out.
Yeah, I'm not buying into Drake. I'm already just still bitter about his lack of performance against Cleveland, so I'm out on Drake. All right, now you know which running backs should be in or out of your lineups for Week 9. We got you covered for every other position too. Check out our playlist for week 9 for start sit advice, trade advice, waiver wire advice, everything you need to win in fantasy.